Welcome to Reframed, Real Life Re-storied, a podcast where we explore mental health as a journey instead of a destination. I'm Haze Schepmyer, I'm a life event transitions mediator, and I'll be hosting these conversations which are brought to you by Black Mental Health Canada. Princess Ecclestone is working behind the scenes as our moderator and technical producer. Our guest today is Akeem Favorite, a Toronto-based father raised in a large, close-knit family whose path has been shaped by deep community roots and personal experiences that have challenged as well as strengthened his perspective on life, purpose, and healing. As a Black man navigating his own mental health journey, Akeem speaks openly about his experiences of healing and resilience, as well as his views on the importance of prioritizing mental wellness, especially within the Black community. Being a proud father to his 20-month-old daughter has further reinforced his advocacy for breaking stigmas while encouraging other Black men who are also in the work of taking care of their mental health and showing up fully for themselves and their families. Welcome, Akeem.
Thank you, Hayes. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So the first thing I'd like to start, just to give a little more context, is how has working for the TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission, our big public transit system, how has working there and in security affected your understanding of the needs, mental health needs in the Black community?
Yeah, to be honest, I never knew um, how bad mental health is until I started working in these industries. Because you're face to face with people in crisis every day. You have stress, you have addictions, you have loneliness, people dealing with anger, grief, burnout, and a lot of untreated mental health struggles. And what really impacted me was recognizing how many Black people, in particular, are carrying this invisible pressure, the financial stress, the cultural expectations, the trauma, immigration issues, experiences of racism, and they're in this survival mode, right? And all these things affect our mental health. And many people, you're on the TTC and you look at these folks and you're wondering like, hey, what's going on? Or this person is crazy, or why are they doing this? But you don't know what they're dealing with internally. You don't know the issues they're facing on a daily basis. In these environments, I've learned that oftentimes behavior is deeper. It tells a story. Um, the person that you see sometimes that is withdrawing, it could be that they're just depressed. That person who's sometimes hyper independent is it's trauma, right? Or that person who's on the bus with music on and they're just bobbing their head. They're just exhausted with life and they just want a moment. And that moment before they get home as they're leaving work is on the TTC, right? So that's what I see every day.
Yeah, yeah. And you reference the cultural expectations and that range of experiences. So in your experience, what has it been like managing some of those cultural expectations while wanting to be open and honest about your experiences?
I think a lot of it is redefining what strength means,
Okay.
because culturally, um, we look at mental health and it's like, oh, this person must be a madman, right? Whereas a lot of times it's just taking care of your well-being, your state of mind, right? Growing up, strength often looked like endurance, right? It's pushing through, staying quiet, handling everything alone, not letting people see you struggle, right? And while resistance is valuable, constantly carrying everything without release can become unhealthy. And that's one of the things that I face with my own struggle is that I have always been seen as the strong guy in my family. So
Okay.
I carried everything on my back. I was dealing with everyone's issues. Everyone came to me with their issues. Plus, I had my issues of my own.
Yeah.
So I was that strong Black man carrying everything, not talking about it until one day I just broke because I couldn't handle the pressure anymore.
Yeah.
So for me now, healing and strength are not the opposite. It actually takes strength to self reflect. It takes strength to communicate honestly, It takes strength to ask for support instead of pretending everything is fine. And that's the thing with us as black men. You see it all the time. We don't want to go to the doctor because everything is fine. And then when you finally do, it's too late, right? Same thing with stress and things you go through in your daily lives. We hold it in and we say we're good because as a black man, I got to be strong, right? I'm not supposed to cry. And we hold
Mm,
those things in. And for me, I value discipline. I value responsibility and composure, but I no longer think silence should be the price of masculinity.
okay.
I also think open conversations are important because there are younger black men who are watching us,
Mm,
right? They need examples of men who are emotionally aware, spiritually grounded, responsible, but yet still human.
yes.
We don't have to choose between being strong and being emotionally healthy. It's just a matter of accepting who we are. And that's what I've accepted. I've accepted that, you know what? I don't have to be strong all the time. That there are going to be days where I just have to be vulnerable and just let it all out and cry. And that's okay too, right? Nothing is wrong as a man. Nothing's wrong with you crying. Nothing is wrong with you being vulnerable about what you're going through and your feelings. Um, and we have to get to that point where we're just not afraid to talk. And for me, I think why men in particular are afraid to talk is we haven't created those safe spaces for men to talk. Um, and what I've been going through, and we spoke about this earlier, Hayes, just before we got on the show, as I was going through my journey, I craved community. I looked for people and organizations that I can be a part of where I can talk freely and express my feelings and open up about the struggle that I'm going through because I realized that holding it in was tearing me apart.
Mm,
And I could no longer hold in and try to balance that. Oh, well, society says this, or culturally, I can't do this, or I have to be this way as a man. Um, no, I just got to a point where I just have to let it all go because
yes.
it was just internally, it was eating me up inside. And it's not until I began to open up and be in spaces where I felt comfortable to open up. And I realized that, hey, there are other people out there that's going through the same thing. Or there are other people out there who haven't gone through it yet, but just hearing my stories, like they're encouraged. You understand? So it's just breaking that stigma
Yeah.
and being able to just forget about what culture says, forget about what society says, and be comfortable with yourself. Be comfortable with opening up and talking, because the best medicine is talking, is getting it out.
Conversation. And I'd love to hear a little more because you referenced broader supports and there were quite a few that you found. What are
Yeah.
some examples of as a black man in Toronto, for example, are there programs or organizations or spaces that you accessed and felt the way you just described?
Yeah. So one of them is actually the T-shirt I'm wearing this afternoon. It's an organization called Black Daddies Club. Again, I'm a father, and there's some trauma there as it relates to fatherhood. But I was in search of an organization that can help me as a young black father. I'm 33. I have my daughter. She's my first child, and you know, I've been going through a lot within my family, and I just wanted to find some someone or organization that can help me as a father navigate this thing that I'm going through. And I did a Google search and came upon Black Daddies Club, and they have this thing called Sunday dinners for dads. And I went, and it was a terrific experience. It's just all black men. Not all of them are fathers. Some of them are just single black men. Some of them have issues with their father or stories of their fathers. Others are fathers who are trying to navigate the system. Some are fathers that have gone through um, marital issues or the justice system. So all different walks of life coming together to share their story and have conversations of how they got through or what they're going through or what helped, what didn't help. How can we support each other as black men, especially as fathers? What are some things that you learned from your father, you didn't learn from your father, right? And some of the stories you hear, I'm a very emotional guy, so I was tearing up, and I had to also do a lot of self-reflecting as well, with my upbringing and fatherhood and why I have the fight that I have when it comes to wanting to be the best father for my daughter, right? So it was a great experience. So there was that. There was also another event I went to. It was called Barbershop Conversations, at Onyx Barbershop. Big up to Onyx, downtown. And it was just men who were coming there for their haircuts or just wanted to be part of the conversation. And everyone was a part of it. The barber, those in the chair, those sitting to get their hair cut, and we're just talking about life, talking about marital issues, talking about family issues, and again, it's just being in that space, recognizing that you're not the only one. Being in that space that allowed you to be vulnerable and to be like, hey, if this person did it and they made it, then I can make it too, right? So it gave me a sense of hope, a sense of belonging as well. Um, so yeah, there's a whole host of them that I've just been a part of. Even I found another Zoom meeting, and it was every Wednesday I would join a group of men from all over, from Toronto, New York, all over states, and through that I met my therapist, and also a life coach who, outside of that conversation every Wednesday, they would call me to motivate me, check up on me, go through my sessions. So going to these programs and being part of these groups, some of these groups I've even found on Eventbrite, just being a part of it really helped in my journey of healing. And I mean, I'm still healing, but I've come a long way, right? And I will encourage any person that's going through something, male or female, um, to find a community that you can be vulnerable with. It doesn't have to be an organization; it could just be really close friends. But just finding that safe space where you can open up without judgment, um, and just be yourself.
Interesting. Thank you for that. And something I'm hearing too is you reference that sometimes it's external organizations, third parties, people you've never met, but there are also times when it might be someone close to you. So I'm interested, as you accessed more of the external, from what I understand, the groups outside of you, were you sharing that information with people close to you? Were you kind of trying to keep the two separate, as you said you were seen as one way? What was it like seeking support and having an experience of being everyone else's support at the same time?
That's a good question, because it's a mixture. Because there were moments where I felt like I was going through this, but didn't have the full support, and not everyone understood. Um, because when you think of depression or anxiety, especially within our West Indian culture, it's like, brush it off. You're good. Go for a walk. You'll be all right. Just pray about it, right? Um, but while I was going through that, there were moments where I felt like people who I thought should have been there wasn't there, and I'm the kind of person, I don't do things for applaud or recognition. I do things on the willingness of my heart. But in that moment, I felt like, man, I'm always running for people. I'm always supporting people. I'm always listening. And it's like, no one's here for me. So that felt heavy while dealing with the depression and the anxiety. Um, and that's what prompted me to look outside of my community, um, to find other people. And then also there was the point of not wanting to be fully vulnerable with my community, because again, as you mentioned, people know me as this strong black man. They know me as Pastor Akeem, So it's like, the word, God, just have faith. But that's why I always hear. But
Yeah.
there wasn't a time where it's like I could just remove all of that, remove the titles, and just be Akeem for a moment, and just be vulnerable with someone, right? Um, so I searched for these communities where no one knew me, and that's what it was. It was that no one knew me, no one knew I was Pastor Akeem, no one knew my upbringing, no one knew where I worked, no one knew my marital status, my family. They were just complete strangers
Yeah.
that I was talking to, and I didn't have to worry about if I tell a stranger this, it's gonna get back to John or get back to Susan,
Mm-hmm.
right? I knew that if I talked about it, hey, they may have thoughts in their mind. They may go tell someone that, hey, I went to a program today and this dude said this and that, but I'll never hear about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Yeah.
so that's there was that part, but then there was the other part where I did have people within my community, within my
Yeah.
family, who are close to me, best friends who really supported me, who would check in on every day, who would make sure I got up the bed and went for walks, who made sure I was doing stuff, or even just took me out to have dinner. Um, so I appreciate those people in my life who did that for me in that tough season, and who are still doing it, right? Because the thing with that I'm finding out with depression and anxiety, it doesn't just come and go like that. For some, it takes years. For me, it's been almost 1 year that I've been going through it.
Yeah.
And I'm a lot better today than I was this time last year. But there are still moments where I feel depressed. There are moments where I still feel the anxiety in my chest tightens, and I start to tremble or I worry. Um, and I realize that this is something that probably won't go away fast. Um, and it takes time. Um, and it takes a good community. It takes people who understand what you're going through, because not everyone understands these kind of things, right? So it takes a community that understands what you're going through, that is patient with you, that can coach you through it and help you through it. Um, and that's what I had. That's what I had. So I had those that really supported, really coached me through, called to pray me through it. Then there was the organizations of men that I found who were going through the exact same thing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I thought I was the only one, or even going through it worse than I was going through it, right? So, and then there was those, of course, those negative things where you try to block those comments out and those people out. But I find that just dealing with what I've been dealing with, and the struggle, is community is so important. Because there were moments where I was just alone, locked away in my room. My phone never rang, no text messages. It was just me. And then when it did ring, I ignored it. I was in a dark place, and it felt lonely. Even though I was there, I didn't want to come out of it. I didn't want to go for a walk, because again, depression does that. It cripples you, right? So even though people were saying that, you got to get up, you got to do this, you got to do that, you can't stay in the funk. I hear you, but actually doing it is another thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And my depression crippled me to the point where I just couldn't get out of the bed. I wanted to, but I couldn't. And in those moments where I couldn't get out, I felt lonely.
Yeah.
I felt so lonely. I felt so dark. Um, but thanks be to God, again, I found, and I think this goes to one of our questions that may come up about faith. Um,
Yes.
I found strength in my faith. Um, I'm a firm believer. I mean, I grew up in the church. There were moments the past year that I was angry with God, angry that I was going through this, angry that these things happened to me, because I'm like, I'm your servant, Lord. I've worked so hard for the church. I've done everything. I've given all, and this is what I get repaid with. Um, and then I was constantly reminded of the story of Job. That Job lost everything, and he still kept the faith. He still trusted in God. I was reminded of different stories, and how each person, each story, they went through the struggle and they came out of it. Um, and for me, balancing faith and trauma and grief, because I was going through all of that. I was dealing with grief because last year I lost a lot of people. I think about 5 or 6 people I lost, and I had to preach at two of those funerals. Um, and one of them was my godfather, who was so dear to my heart. Um, he was everything to me. And he died unexpectedly, and I didn't even know he died. I think that was the shocking thing for me, is that I picked up the phone to call him to say, "Hey, this is happening," and his wife answered, and she's like, "Do you not know he passed?" And I said, and my heart sunk on that phone. I dropped the phone and I just started to bawl because that was a phone call I was not expecting. And in the midst of my anxiety, in the midst of my depression, in the midst of previous grief, here's another big one. And this was the biggest one for me last year, was losing him. And I had to actually, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't. And I said to her, where is he buried? Like, did this happen yesterday? Like, what happened? I was just so baffled. And she told me where she was buried, and I had a friend who works at the funeral home, and I had her look up his name, and she's like, "Yeah, he's actually here. He's at spot whatever." And even then, I still couldn't believe it. I had to actually go to the graveside, and I sat down at the grave, and I just cried. I just cried. Um, so I was dealing with all of that, and I was angry with God, but yet I was still hearing people say, "Have faith. You'll get through this. Just pray. You know the word." And yeah, I know the word, and yeah, this is all great. But in that moment, I didn't want to do any of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't want to do any of that because I felt like my grief and my trauma and my anxiety and my depression was bigger than my God, even though I know my God is bigger than all of that.
Yeah.
But while you're in the pit, while you're in the valley, and everything around you is dark, sometimes you can't see your way out. And that's how I felt like there's no way I'm coming out of this. I cannot see my way out. So even though I had that mustard seed faith, and I actually have a keychain that has a little mustard seed on it now that I bought from Amazon, and I walk with it as a reminder that God only requires me to have that mustard seed faith. So even though in my darkest moment I didn't have that big grand faith, there was still that mustard seed in me that kept me going. Because I believe if it wasn't for my faith and trust in God, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't, because there were days where I wanted to die. I wanted to just kill myself because of what I was going through, and I couldn't handle the pain anymore. And I thought that life would be better without me. Um, there were days where it was so hard, like I said, to get out the bed. There were days where I didn't eat, I didn't drink, I didn't sleep. Um, I lost a lot of weight because of stress. I started to develop all kind of sickness because of it. And that saying that stress is a killer? Well, it was actually killing me. It was killing me. And it was in that moment where I had to push through that black hole and find that mustard seed faith and hold on to that mustard seed faith and remind myself, as the word says, that God only requires us to have that mustard seed faith. And if we just have that mustard seed faith, we could say that mountain to be moved and it will be moved. And I had to encourage myself every day that God knows it's hard. God knows it's hard. He knows what you're going through, but just have that little faith. So I had to learn how to balance my faith and the trauma, because at the end of the day, going through trauma, going through grief, going through depression shows I'm human, right? If I didn't experience those things, then you have to wonder, am I really human? Especially with the events that have taken place in my life in the last year. I think anyone that has gone through what I've been through in the last year, would go through some type of trauma, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whatever it is. Um, so it's just finding my faith again, holding on to the faith that I grew up on, and understanding that it was also okay for me to be mad at God. It's okay to feel the way I feel, right? Because again, we have this view as Christians that, you know, God is this amazing, perfect God, which He is, but it's like at the same time, it's like I wasn't allowed because of my status in society and who I am. I wasn't allowed to show my human side. I wasn't allowed to be angry. I wasn't allowed to be like, you know what? I don't want to pray. I don't want to hear anything about God. I don't want to have those conversations, right? Um, so it was just trying to find strength in all of that, and not allowing my mind to take over, because that's what it was. It was my mind saying, you know what, like Job, just curse God and die. Like you know, you like you said, you've been so good. You got baptized, you got married, you had a child in not outside of wedlock. You did everything right, but yet here you are still going through your trials. So it's like, what's the point? Right? What's the point of still trusting this God? Just curse him and die. And that's how I felt. I was literally going through my Job experience, and I'm still going through it, where I lost everything, and I lost the only thing I didn't lose is my mind, and I almost came close to it. Um, so yeah, faith, 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 and going through this plays a big role, and it was my faith that really helped me get through, even though I had those moments of doubt.
Okay. And something I'm really felt in that share, in that offering you gave, is the willingness to break the stigma of the word. So you said a few times that people told you you know the word and that should be enough, but you also referenced you weren't prepared to hear that or you couldn't hear that. So knowing that you do so much as a leader in the Black community and have had opportunities, how are you changing that message for the youth or the young adults that you get to encounter? How are you passing on a different version of the message that could have been helpful for you to hear and save some of what you went through?
Um, Something I alluded to earlier, um, people. There's a saying that says, don't quote me on this. I'm paraphrasing, but it says that you are the only church that people would see sometimes. There are some people in this world that will never walk inside of a church, will never sit down and go through a service. Um, but your life, the way you live, is the only church people may see. And that's something, especially with this generation of young people, because I work with young people a lot, and they question things more than my generation did.
Okay.
They want to know why we go to church. Why do we believe what we believe? Why do we have to do this? There's a lot of whys. And I realized that, especially when I was going through my struggle, that yes, the word is good and the word is relevant even for today. And it's relevant for every situation we go through. But sometimes when people are going through things, especially when it comes to mental health issues, their mind is far from the word. Yeah, there may be times where, and it happened to me, where you're laying there and you're crying, and something comes back to you, like a text that says, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." And I keep reminding myself, joy is coming in the morning. But then I go right back. Um, and it wasn't until I started to go into these spaces, because God doesn't just work through the word; He also works through people. And it's when I was in these spaces that, and having these conversations, I believe that God pointed me to these organizations, pointed me to these people, and had these people talk to me and encourage me while I'm going through. And to be honest with you, some of these people I've met are also believers who who didn't just throw scripture at me, but told me real life stories. who said, "Listen, I went through this and this happened," and and they somehow connected it to the word, and that's how I got my encouragement. I remember one of my sessions with my therapist, who's also a believer. I was telling him that my family and I are going through a season of prayer and fasting, and that session, him and I, it turned into a Bible study. And when we were done, he's like, "I'm gonna pray for you," and he prayed, and the way he prayed, Hayes, I tell you, like I felt the hairs on my arm stand up. I could feel it through the screen, and that's what I mean when I say that there are persons that will never walk into a church, but your life, the life that you live, the example that you show to people, will win them over. And that's the message I have today when I deal with young people. Um, the first thing is I'm not going to throw the word at them. It's my life. It's the life I live. It's the example that I have to show them. It's my testimony, right? Because young people would come to a Zoom meeting or a YouTube, watch YouTube like this, and listen to this conversation. I'm still talking about God. I'm still throwing out scripture, and they'll sit here and listen. But then the minute I open the Bible and actually start reading it, it's a different conversation. So for me, how I'm changing that is still using the word, but making it practical. Sharing my story like I am now, having those candid conversations, those real conversations, and still pointing them to Jesus and letting them know that in the midst of your trials, when you're going through it, and remember, as you think about the story of Jesus on the boat with his disciples, they were in the midst of a storm. Like I'm in one now. I'm in the midst of a storm, and Jesus was sleeping on that boat while we're in the storm. And at times, that's how I felt in my situation. I felt like Jesus was sleeping because I'm praying, and I'm like, God, where are you? Why am I going through this? Why aren't you rescuing me? And because it got to a point where every day I was going through something. Every week there was something happening to me. And I'm like, God, I can't take this anymore. Where are you? Rescue me. But we serve an on time God. God knows when to show up. And just like the disciples on that boat, Jesus woke up at the right time and he calmed that storm. So that story teaches me that even in the midst of our storms, and even when we think God is asleep, God will still rescue us. God will still calm the storms in our lives. We just have to hold on. And
Absolutely.
as I said earlier, go have that faith that
Yeah.
the storm that we're in, God will calm that storm. He will. Yeah.
Thank you for that experience and the recognition. Again, I want to pull something that you've spoken to because you've alluded to the importance of fatherhood, and I know that that's also been a very relevant theme for you having a 20-month-old. And you've talked a bit about how you are communicating in ways to younger generations. How have your choices about your mental health journey and the supports you've been seeking, how have you been sharing that with your daughter? How have you been making it clear that you are making hard choices sometimes, and also making it clear that there has been joy because of her? How are you passing on some of what you're choosing to do differently to your daughter through your words and your actions?
Well, if I can be honest,
Yes, please be honest.
it's been a rough journey as it relates to fatherhood.
Yep.
I'm a first time father, and having my daughter come into our lives it was a blessing. Um, she's a miracle baby, and I was so proud to have my first child, and for it to be a girl. They say about girl dads, and when I saw her for the first time, I looked at her and I made sure everything was intact, and I said a silent prayer, um, and I said to her silently as I'm praying, I said, God, give me the strength to be the best father I can be, to always show up for this little girl. And I said, Araya, I promise you, Daddy will always be here. And when my depression started, to be honest, there were days where I couldn't hold my daughter. It was hard. Um, and when I did hold her, I would just cry, because I'm like, I promised her that I would be here, but right now I feel like I don't want to be here because the weight that I'm carrying. And um, something tragic happened in my life last summer, and because of that, I wasn't able to see my daughter for 7 months, and that was the hardest 7 months of my life. Um, dealing with grief, dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, and now I'm dealing with the fact that I can't see my daughter,
Oh my God.
and that was so hard on me. Um, there are days where I didn't even want to get out of bed because of that. Um, and this something I met someone and they told me, I should start journaling and writing letters, and that's what I started doing. I started journaling my story, started writing letters to my daughter, um, and just writing about what I'm going through because in that moment I felt like I don't know if I'll be here tomorrow. I don't know if I'll be here next year. So, in case I'm not, let me just write this, um, so she can know the kind of guy I was, right? And um, for me, it was finding strength and reminding myself that I made a promise to my daughter, that I promised her that I'm going to be here for her, that I'm going to show up. And even though I was going through what I was going through and I wasn't able to see her, um, I had to keep that hope alive that I'm going to see her one day, and that whatever I'm going through, I got to fight for my daughter. And this fight, I questioned it, and I talked about it in therapy. Like, why do I have this fight? Why am I so determined to see my daughter, to do whatever it takes, to just be that kind of father for her? And in counseling, one of the things that came up that I had to reflect on is my own upbringing. Um, for whatever reason, my dad wasn't around growing up, and today, my dad and he's my best friend, one of my best friends. We have the most amazing relationship. But that doesn't take away the fact that growing up, you go to school and you say one of their dads, or you're part of a sports team at school, and everyone's dad's showing up and yours isn't there. But even though my dad wasn't physically there, I still applaud my dad because I knew who my dad was. He always called. He always sent gifts or Christmas cards, sent pictures. So I always knew who my dad was. So he showed up in other ways.
Yeah.
But that fight came from that, is that I wanted to be a dad that was physically there. And now that was taken away. Um, and that's what really hurt me, is that I'm like, I failed. I failed as a father because I promised my daughter that I'm going to be physically there, and now I'm not. So I felt like a failure. I felt like I let my daughter down. And in those moments where I just wanted to give up, I had to remind myself, Akeem, you know what? You may have failed in this way, but you cannot fail in other ways. So you have to fight. You have to fight. You have to get your head straight, get well for your daughter. And that's what brought me to that place of stability. um, is that I had to remind myself every day that my daughter needs me, even though she can't see me, even though I'm not around. She needs me, and I have to find the strength to get out that bed every day. I have to find the strength to go for that walk, to take that medication, to be active and do something to get my head back to where it used to be, so that when I do see my daughter, I am the best that I can be. And that's what motivated me. And when I did finally get to see her, it was the greatest joy of my life. I cried, I cried. And even though she cried too, because she didn't remember me, and she's looking at me like, "Who are you?" The fact that I just got to hold her again, it meant so much. And even though now I can't show up in the way that I want to, um, I'm still showing up. I have visits, and I show up. I cancel appointments to make sure that I go to my visits, because right now, the most important, or one of the most important persons in my life, is my daughter. And as I said in that delivery room, I promised her that I'm going to show up. And even though I missed 7 precious months of her life, I missed her first word, I missed her first steps. Um, I'm doing what I can now as a father to show up for my daughter. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm not perfect, and people may look at me and say you could still do better, but I'm doing the best that I can.
That's
I'm doing the
good.
best that I can, and I will do whatever I can to always show up for my daughter, because my daughter needs me. No matter what people may say, no matter what's happening in life right now, um, every child needs their parents, regardless of the situation. Um, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to be a good dad and just show up.
That's such a that's such a it's a moving example of your willingness to keep fighting for your daughter, and I just keep hearing how much she's doing for you. So in the same way that you are advocating because your mental health journey impacts her, I've heard so many different examples of how she is impacting your mental health journey, and
Yeah.
she is helping you make choices that you would not may not have been able to make
Hmm.
without her.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh my goodness. And something else that I would like to kind of pull together is you've referenced a few different ways that cultural expectations used to be a voice and still are a voice, and there are times when you're able to kind of tune them out. Is that something that you is that something you do automatically? Is that something that you hear things, take them on, and have to kind of shake off? Because cultural expectations are essentially always around. So, how have you been either become less sensitive to them or been able to kind of stand them? How have cultural expectations and your response to them changed?
There's a saying that says you gotta pick sense out of nonsense, and sometimes, and I know people mean well, right? But again, as I said earlier, that there are some people who don't fully understand what it's like to go through what I've gone through. I know they mean well, but sometimes some people just say some things that are so ridiculous. Um, but again, because of the kind of person I am, I just listen. I say okay, and I pick the sense out of the nonsense. Not everything people say to me, I take it as gospel. Not everything people tell me to do, I do. Um, I have to find my own strength. I have to find what works for me, because what works for you may not work for me,
Yeah,
right? Um, so for me, that's what it was. It's just listening, because I'm a good listener. I will listen. I will dissect. I will
yeah,
take out what's for me, what's not for me. I will do
yeah,
what I can, and whatever I can't do, I don't do. And it's also it's also celebrating myself and celebrating those small wins. Because there are times where, um, like I said, there's certain things I just couldn't do, and people will say things, and I actually tried it, and if it worked, I'm like, oh, wow, I gotta celebrate that, right? Because there's so much things going wrong right now in my life that I feel like nothing is going right. So the minute I find something that is going well or I'm winning at, I gotta celebrate it. Um, but yeah, culture, culture and mental health is it has its pros and it has its cons, right? The pro about it is that there are days where some good reggae music, some good soca will just put me in a vibe. That's my culture. I'm Guyanese Jamaican, and I love good music. Some gospel music will just set my mind straight. Um, some good home cooked food. I remember when I was at another point in this stage of life, and one of my mothers. I have a lot of mothers.
Yes.
My mothers came to see me, and she knows all the things I like, and she brought oxtail and fried dumpling and breadfruit and rice and peas and jerk chicken, and man, that food lasted about 2 weeks. But even though my appetite then was so small, I could hardly eat. The fact that I just had that comfort food, it felt good. It felt good in that moment. So culture can do good things for you, right? But then there's the cons of it, where there's that stigma, where, like I said earlier, you see a man walking down the street wearing a hat and his pants pull up and tear up jeans, you automatically think he's a madman, and you pass your remarks about him, not knowing what he has gone through, not knowing the battles he had to fight. Um, you know, Someone may see me laying in my bed all day and they come and beat you. Yo, get up, man. You sit on the bed all day. Da, da, da. Don't let the depression take you over. You have to. You, culture, right? Because when you don't fully understand, that's how you act, right? But when you understand what the person is going through, you're more compassionate. You're more sympathetic towards their feelings and what they're going through, right? So, as I said, you just gotta pick the sense out of nonsense. You gotta brush off some things, and especially with this, you can't be so thin-skinned. You have to have a tough back because, again, people are gonna say a lot of things, and during this year, I've heard a lot of things about myself, a lot of things I didn't even know, a lot of negative things. Um, and I'm gonna be honest, it hurt me because I am human. I am human. I do have emotions. I do have feelings, and um, people's behaviors and the things they do and say, they will affect me because I am human. But I had to learn to not let everything bother me and just have that thick skin to allow it to just roll off my back. And even though it rolls off, it still kind of scratch you a little bit. You still feel a little something, right? So yeah, it's just like I said, just picking sense out of nonsense and having that tough skin, and
Okay.
and recognizing that um, sometimes you have to just be selfish when it comes to your mental health. You have to be selfish, and that's something I had to learn because I was doing a lot of worrying about people. Because that's who I am. I'm always worried about people. I always want to be there for people. I always want to show up for people. But I had to get to a point where I had to be selfish and just think about me, think about my well-being. Because if I'm not well, I can't show up for my daughter. If I'm not well, I can't show up to work. If I'm not well, I can't show up for people. So regardless of what culture says, regardless of what the stigma are, I had to just mute all of that and focus on me and do things for me that made me happy and show up for me and take care of me, because no one could love me like me. And and I think that's the message I want to probably end with as we close off, is that as black men going through this mental health journey and all that we go through as men and what society tells us, and the things we face, and you go to work, you deal with stress, you come home, you deal with stress, and all these things, and all of that, black man, all I could say to you in all of that is take care of you. take care of you, take care of your mental health, um, be there for yourself. If you gotta take a time out, take a time out, go sit down in the car, in the driveway. I've learned to start going on solo dates. I went to a solo date, went to a comedy show, and I just laughed. Taking care of myself and just showing up for me because for far too long I've showed up for so many people, and it's about time that I showed up for me, took care of me, did things that made me happy, so that I can now be the best for people again.
Thank you. So I feel so we have a few minutes, but I was something that I just wanted to kind of hear. You've spoken quite clearly about the different supports that you've accessed around Toronto and in the area of GTA. I would love to know in closing for organizations that are listening, are there any gaps that you would identify in services that could have been helpful for you, that could have been something that you would have recommended for someone? Just hearing what you've taken in, is there are there any gaps that you would want to point out or
Yeah,
consider?
I think one of the big ones is following up. Because I find a lot of times I went to different things and the programs may have been great. You're on a high, you feel good, and then you get home and you're back in your funk.
Okay.
And these organizers, organizations, um, to some of them, it's just another event they're putting on. And yeah, you're trying to make a difference and impact the lives of your attendees. But then what happens when I leave that event? What happens? And in those moments, I wish that some of those organizers reached out to me to be like, hey, thanks for coming. How are you doing? How's things going? What can we do to continue to support you as you're going through things? Um, like I said, in one of my groups that I found, the Black Men Support Group on a Wednesday, I appreciate that group because outside of that group, men took my number and reached out to me, right? And I think that's the piece with a lot of organizations is we all do great at putting on events. We all do great of encouraging people and getting them on that high and feeling motivated. But what happens when they leave that room? And the reality is that many of us who are going through this mental health journey, when we leave that room, we go back to the same stress. We pick up the same trauma. We go back to that fear and back in that space where we have no one to talk to. And we'll be lucky if we've connected with people at that event that stay in touch with us. I've been to, I think, 3 or 4 different events last year and this year, and I met men who I've exchanged numbers with and who've checked in with me or I checked in with them. And that was so good, right? So that's my piece to organizations, I would say, is doing a better job of supporting persons when they come to these events and not just seeing it as another guest, but seeing it as someone that is going through something that needs help. And they may not have said anything in that moment, but oftentimes when people show up to these things, they're crying out for help. And they may not vocalize it, but their presence and just listening is enough, right? So it's better support. And I think that's one of the questions we probably had that we didn't end up covering. But how can the community support Black men better or support those going through mental health issues? And it's the same thing. It's having better resources that we can access, resources that are free. Number one, because sometimes people who are going through these struggles, they're off work, like myself, they can't afford to attend some of these events. But having better resources, access to things that are free, um, and just allowing people to be vulnerable in spaces that they they they, they they're allowing people to be vulnerable in spaces, right? And just supporting them as best as possible with a follow-up call, with inviting them to another event, connecting them with other men who probably they can talk to, but stuff like that, you know.
Okay. Thank you, Akeem. Thank you so much for your candor and for your willingness to be that much of a to be that much to be that much of a conversation starter and a
Yes,
conversation kind of consumer as well.
yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome so
I
much, and
see.
it's good to be here. I really
Indeed.
appreciate the invitation, and thank you once again for allowing me to
Thank you.
speak. Yeah.
Yes, you bet.